Welcome to the Spectrum Connection, a podcast hosted by Jess
and Alyce. As two mums of neurodivergent kids, we are here to share our experiences, insights, and advice with other parents navigating this unique journey.
Join us as we discuss everything from daily challenges to breakthrough moments, all with a focus on understanding and celebrating neurodivergence.
Welcome to another episode. We're going to be speaking about autistic babies in this one.
I love this one because I just find the title so funny to me because people wouldn't expect you to say autistic babies because you obviously can't know if they're autistic when they're babies. But when you look back, they're obviously autistic babies.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So we've actually asked the community what their children were like when they were babies. Now that they know that they're autistic and I guess hindsight's a great thing. You can look back and go, what were the signs that you saw? And I actually saw quite a few in Jacob as a baby. And now that I know that he's autistic, it's like, okay. Yeah, that was that. That was that. So I guess when Jacob was a baby, he obviously didn't sleep well. And that's a very common thing I hear with a lot of autistic babies is that they don't sleep well. They kind of are very unsettled, or they're the opposite and they're very settled. That's what I hear from a lot of people. They didn't need that parent to hold them or settle them very much, but Jacob was very much the opposite. He needed constant bouncing. We used to find it so funny. We would just be bopping up and down with him. And if we stopped, he'd cry. And it was this is exhausting. But yeah, he was just very.
You didn't need the gym back then because
we've got videos of us doing it too. It's so funny. But yeah, no, very much didn't settle very easily and didn't sleep well. Yeah. So looking back, that was probably one of the biggest things that we saw in him as a baby.
Yeah, we definitely had the sleep thing as well. Just think about rocking for what felt like an hour to get them to sleep and finally asleep, and then they'd sleep for 15, 20 minutes and then be up again. And it was just this continuous cycle. And it didn't matter what books I read or what advice I took from other people, everything I tried did not work.
Yeah.
And I think by, after the second child, it was just kind of I'm just going to throw out everything that I've been told. I'm just going to wing it. And funnily enough, the younger two were better sleepers than the older two. And I think probably because I just threw everything out the window and just went with them. But yeah, they're funny how they're different. And I remember for one of my boys, their early childhood center that they were in had in their cot room, they had these little twinkle lights up in the roof. It was really cool. It looked like stars almost. But one of my kids, if those were on and he was in there, he was he would not sleep. He would not sleep. He obviously was overstimulated with the light. So it was kind of I put two and two together and I'm you have to turn the lights off. It's hard if there's other kids in there that suits. But my kid's not going to sleep if he's got them in there. So
yeah, was he settled though? He could have just been looking at it as a visual sensory input.
Yeah, no, he didn't like being on his own in a cot. So it was kind of one of them things you settle him for sleep and then you'd have to transfer him, and then he stirred and he's seen the lights. It was kind of that was it. That was it. He was up.
Can relate so much to that. Jacob just he was always on me.
Yeah.
If he was off me, he'd wake up in 2 seconds. It's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was interesting because I found for that child that I have in mind, as he got older, I was so exhausted. So he wasn't sleeping. I got to the point where I was just just put him in the bed with us in the middle of the night, he'll sleep, but he never slept. And I found out that he actually slept better if he was in his bed, with his own space. And he's been like that his whole life. Like he does not ever slept in our bed. He sleeps, even now he's happy just to go to his bed, whereas the other kids have all taken turns. And at the moment, I've still got 2 kids in my bed. You need that constant, like, knowing that you're there to be able to sleep. But
Yeah.
that 1 out of the 4, he cannot sleep if you're there. He just can't do it. So,
Interesting that you say that because I noticed that with Jacob too, as much as he needed to be held and all of that, we actually ended up taking him out of our room. But maybe not for that reason. Maybe it was the sound thing. I've always said Jacob's like super sensitive to sound.
yeah,
People used to think I was mad, basically, being like, shh, don't wake him up. Like, and they're
yeah,
like, no, you've got to be loud around babies. And I'm like, no, you're actually gonna wake him up. And he would hear like the creak in the floor and then wake up. So we ended up putting him out of our room for that reason. Cause I'm like, imagine I'm like waking him up. I don't know if I sleep talk a little bit. So
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
make noise in my sleep. So I'm just gonna wake him up. And that ended up helping a little bit, I think. But yeah, he's always been very sensitive to sound, and I think only now people are starting to believe me. But yeah, no, I think it's interesting when you're in that space, and I think especially for your first child, you're super nervous, you're anxious, you're like, "Am I doing the right thing? Am I, like, buying all these programs that help our kids sleep?"
yeah,
And, it's interesting that you said that your younger 2 slept better because I feel like maybe you're just more at ease and
yeah,
they feel that. They're like, "Oh, mom's like calmer." And I
yeah,
definitely was trying to keep up with the Joneses for Jacob. I was trying to do everything perfectly. And yeah, I definitely think he picked up on that. Although,
yeah. And I think it's that for me anyway, is that's like sleep trauma, like we're like, oh, it's bedtime, the night time's coming, like they're getting tired. And it's just that dread, like, how long is this going to take? What do I have to do this time? Like, am I walking the hallway, rocking, or, they're going to let me sit down to rock them? Like, yeah, it's that. Yeah. And so then obviously they feed off that anxiety that you have.
yeah, it is traumatic. Like I
It
talk about
is.
this with
Yeah.
a lot of parents. It's bedtime anxiety because we don't
Yeah.
know when our kids are going to fall asleep. It's not I don't want to relate it to neurotypical families, but there are a lot of families that can just put their child in a bed and they will go to sleep. Like,
Good night. And then out they go. That blows my mind. What is that? I've never
how?
experienced that.
And like
Yeah.
it's just like it just happens for them. Like they don't have to do anything special. Like they maybe follow a routine or a program, but yeah, that stuff just doesn't work for our
Work.
kids.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think that we did try everything for Jacob's sleep and never successful. We tried Tricilian. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. It's like a sleep program you go to in the public
Yeah.
system and they tried everything with him
Yeah.
and to the point where they were just like, I don't know if it's gonna get any better. So you just go
He
home.
didn't graduate.
And it was traumatic too because they were doing a lot of
Yeah.
things that I wouldn't normally be okay with, but I was very
Yeah, yeah,
desperate.
and I had the same with my also, like, we didn't go to Tricilian, but I followed I think I've spoken about this before, I followed the Save Our Sleep book and the whole, like, basically crying it out type method because I got to that, like, point of desperation where, first time mom, I'm exhausted and everyone's telling me that this kid should be sleeping better than they are, and so
Mhm.
I tried that and it was, yeah, just as traumatic. And like some of the advice that I was getting from people, like I remember a friend of mine saying, oh yeah, my kid's the same. I have to just take the monitor and like just put them in and go outside so I can't hear them and just watch the monitor. And I'm just like, I can't do that. That's not me. Like I cannot, I just couldn't do it. So
Oh my
yeah,
god.
and I look back on it. Yeah. And I look back on it now and I think like the times that I tried to
Mm.
just put them to bed and just let them cry and being like, I feel really bad that
Yeah,
looking back on it, but
I think
you
we
don't know what you don't know.
I
Yeah.
think we all did it. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
not everyone, but I think it's just very common to get to a point of such desperation for sleep that you're gonna try things.
Yeah.
I did it too. We were told to do it and
Yeah.
didn't work, so I never did it again. But yeah, I think it was interesting as Jacob got a little bit older, so maybe like around the 8, 9-month mark, he would stand in his cot and like jump in his cot. Like he's obviously a jumper now, we know this, like he loves that. But when I would put him his bed, I would walk out the room and he would just jump for like, I would say like 4 or 5 hours, like just jumping. He was happy, jumping up and down. I'd go in and check on him. He's just jumping up and down. I remember like asking people, I'm like, is this okay for me just to leave him doing this? He's not crying and he's just happy and he just didn't want to go to sleep. Like he just jump up and down. And so I think soon after that, maybe like 6 months after that, someone introduced us to melatonin. And I think it was the GP. And yeah, that helped with that. But it was interesting to look back at that he was seeking that jumping
Yeah.
input.
Yeah.
And he really liked the jumper, like those ones that attach.
Oh, yeah. Jolly jumper. What are they
Jolly
called?
jumper,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah. He loved that.
Yeah.
Loved that. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, feeding. Feeding was
Feeding. Yeah.
strange.
I was going to say, yeah.
That was
Yeah.
different.
We had
Your kids
difficulties
have,
there too.
yeah.
Yeah. Eldest one I couldn't feed. Like, we didn't breastfeed at all. We had a couple of complications with birth, like blood sugars and stuff anyway. But yeah, I
Okay.
couldn't feed. The others weren't too bad, but I don't think we ever got past like 6, 7 months. It was just, yeah, I don't know, just, I don't know. I introduced the bottle and that was it. They like just preferred that. And I think looking back, I probably pushed myself to feed more than probably what I should have because I think that was like for my own like personal space of being touched out and stuff. But it was just that idea, like I have to feed. So I just kind of pushed.
Yeah.
I wish I could like go
I
back in
get
time
that.
and tell myself it's okay. Like just give up and just,
Yeah.
better for your mental health to do that. But anyway,
It's the hormones. I swear it's the hormones.
yes,
They like tell you you should be doing this. Like that's the hormones telling me. I'm like having all this guilt about stopping breastfeeding. And now
yeah,
that I look back, I'm like, what? How did I
yeah.
think that?
And I often think for me, if it was like the transition, because like transition of feeding and then not and doing a bottle. And that was hard for me to like do that change because I kind of I struggle with transition. So looking back, I think that was it because I would like start to wean, but then be like, hang on, this isn't right. Like I'd still try it. So probably more
Yeah.
me than what them. But anyway, that's a
Yeah.
whole nother topic.
When Jacob was
But yeah,
born, he didn't latch properly. And
yeah,
hindsight, years down the track, I've asked the community about this, and a lot of autistic babies have trouble latching. And
yeah,
I don't know there's no like science to it or whatever. I think
yeah, yeah,
it's just a common trait, I guess. But Jacob was just like, and I would insist because this was my first child. I was like told breastfeeding is best. Wish I didn't do that to myself because I honestly think I traumatized myself there. We
yeah,
used like the shield to do it. And eventually he would latch on and start feeding, but we did mix like bottle and breastfeeding. And yeah, he definitely preferred the bottle. And he used that bottle for about 5 or 6 years.
yeah, yeah,
He loved that bottle. And yeah, it's interesting when you look back at that because the latching was so hard. And with Jazz, my other child, she came after. She latched straight away. She was fine to breastfeed and she breastfed for 2.5 years. And it's funny that you said about that personal space thing because I really did struggle with that.
yeah.
But I think that she was using me as a sensory uh, input.
Well, yeah.
and she wouldn't take a bottle, did not want a bottle at all. And I was like, I think it was more is it proprioceptive where you like hugging?
Yeah.
So she, I think, preferred that whole aspect of hugging because that's what she got every time she breastfed too. So yeah, it's interesting how they're so different.
Regulation tool. Yeah. And I'm thinking back to bottles. Introducing a bottle was like a whole other thing too, because of the different types. Like, went through so many different types of bottles to try and get them to take one, and then they just took one, and then that was it. Like, that was the bottle. You couldn't like, they wouldn't drink from anything else. It had to be the same one all the time. That was a very expensive exercise.
Yeah,
None of my kids took a dummy. I look back on that now and I'm like, I don't know if that was a sensory thing, because they would just like they would gag and then spit it out. And I'm like, yeah, some of them, like, they have sensory things with food. So, that's very, and yeah, they obviously got oral sensitivities. So I often think if that was the case, I was so desperate for them to take a dummy.
yeah.
Like, when they're unsettled, it's like everyone just gives their kid a dummy and then the kid's settled. I was like, please just take, and I bought all the dummies on the market, trying all.
I can tell you firsthand, it didn't help for Jacob. He loved the dummy, but it didn't settle him. He loved the dummy. He ended up having always had to have one in each hand and one in his mouth. But yeah, as a baby, it didn't.
Its purpose.
No, sorry.
And I even remember with my kids, some of them where I'd have to rock and bounce to be able to feed them, because it was like, I always wondered, I was like, oh, they must be overtired. Like, I've missed the cues, all those things you get told. But looking back, I don't think it was. I think it was just overstimulation.
Yeah.
They're just that overstimulated that, they couldn't drink or whatever, had to regulate. So yeah, bouncing up and down, and, they'd go for hours in between bottles. Obviously they were hungry. Obviously they needed food, but they just refused. So I'd have to get creative on how to feed them. So bounce up and down and walk up the hallway and all to try and get them to feed. Yeah, interesting.
I remember doing that too. Yeah, and interestingly enough, I think I did that for feeding too. But Jacob took to the bottle very well. Jazz just nope, no bottle. We actually asked the community, as I said, their experiences. So it'd be cool if we could read out a few of theirs. I think I relate to every single one of these. But someone said that even when they were pregnant, they would wake from 1 till 4 a.m. And I experienced that too.
Yeah.
I always
said it was like your body preparing you for what's to come.
Yes. Yes.
That pregnancy insomnia is, it's getting your body ready, changing your body clock up.
Yeah. I think I used to be a really good sleeper. I'd sleep perfectly. And so when I was pregnant and that happened, I was like, this is horrible. But then when Jacob obviously was born, he would wake up every 2 hours on the dot all night long.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get it. You were waking me up. And there's a lot of people that said that they had terrible sleepers. I don't know. What's a different word for them? I feel like that's horrible to say. Didn't sleep through the night. There we go. Someone said their child was sensitive to milk. It's interesting.
Okay.
I think that's more like the allergy side, which I feel like there is a link to neurodivergence and allergies. So someone said that they always needed to be bounced. And yet I remember talking to someone about that, and they were like, oh, we need to bounce our kid, but only just when he's settling him for sleep. And I was like, no, we need to do it 24/7. Otherwise he's screaming his head off. And I'm like, oh, that's not what everyone else is doing. I just thought it was not I honestly thought that was the normal newborn experience. I'd heard it was hard, and I just went through it and thinking, oh yeah, this is babies. But
yeah.
Apparently don't scream their head off all the time.
Yeah. And I think back, actually, my first two were diagnosed with that silent reflux. That's what they put it down to, silent reflux. And I'd try the reflux formulas and, the medication, all that, and it didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so now I look back at it, I'm like, I don't think it was silent reflux. Like,
No, but then I think about, like, sensory-wise, we were
Yeah.
wrapping him in a swaddle, like, and Jacob's, like, so sensitive to clothing. I'm like, he could have
Yeah.
been, like, so just, like, screaming out in pain from the clothes that I was putting him in, and I always
Yeah.
think back to that, I'm like, "That's so horrible." Like, imagine this little being that can't convey anything, can't have any control over anything, is just being swaddled. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just makes
Yeah,
me
and I did the
cry.
same. The child that absolutely hates sleeping in the bed with people, like, I did the same as swaddling because
Yeah.
that's what you get told, right? That's what you need to do. I
Yeah.
don't know what age you would have been closer to, like, the time when you start to unravel. I can't even think what I think it was like a month before that kind of time, and I thought I'd just start testing it out because, new mum, and I didn't know how that works, that transition thing. And I remember testing it out, and he slept better, and I was like, "Okay, maybe we just won't swaddle." Like, it took however many months, or the 4 months in or something to go, "Oh, maybe he doesn't need to actually."
Yeah.
Maybe.
Although I think there was a comment here. Someone said that my son needed to be swaddled up until he was 2 years old. So some kids probably loved that
Yeah.
input, and some kids were
Yeah.
just like, "What are you doing to me?" And they can't say that. It's so sad. I'm thinking back. Oh. She said, yeah, he needed to be swaddled up until 2. He loved deep pressure even as an infant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just goes to show, like, you get told all these things of what you should do, like society, like everything gets told what you should do, what the books say, what the research says, blah, blah, blah. But like everyone, just parenting in general, just throw that all and
Yeah.
just go with your specific child and your gut on what you think's best because, yeah.
Yeah. I think your instinct is the best information that you can get. Obviously, you
Yeah.
can get information from other people, but honestly, I think every child is so different that you can obviously see every child is so different, whether they're neurodivergent or not. So just like go with your instinct. I think someone
Yeah.
else said, my third child is autistic. I knew he was very different from the very first moment I saw her at birth. Oh, it's a her. Sorry. I said he, then her. Sorry. Yeah. A lot of people say also the eye contact thing when they're babies. And
Yeah.
it was something that Jacob did do a lot of. He used to look at us a lot and laugh at us. But I'm wondering if that's just more, I don't know, this difference. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
My kids were
notice,
very alert too after, like when they were first born. Like I just remember I've got videos of like them just, they've just put them on my chest and their head pops up and starts looking around the room. Like,
Jacob did
and
that too.
yeah, and people have said to me, like, I remember, families have, "Oh, they're very alert." And I'm like, "Oh, are they not?" You know? And then you see other kids and they're just, photos and videos of when they're first born, they're just like asleep. Like they're just like, just
Sleepless
chilling.
that.
But my kids were not like that. They were like looking around, like, all right, where am I? What's going on? What are these lights? Like, very,
Yeah, and the hospital environment is like LED lights. Like I found I had to get them to turn the lights off because I was like, this is a lot. And can you
yeah.
imagine if you're just being born into a world and just like bam, bam, everything's just in your face. There's lots of people touching
Yeah.
you. Like, ooh.
Yeah.
Someone else said my daughter cried a lot. We held her a lot too, and cried when they saw people, other people.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
That's interesting. Jacob would cry when people came to visit us too. It's all coming together.
Yeah.
So that's all of the comments that we got from the community. I just find it so interesting how when you look back that you can find so many things, but in the moment you can't notify that as autism. But
Right.
yeah, it's very interesting.